Welcome back to the second episode with Eric Cross. We are the Dynasty Dingers podcast. We have a great episode for you today. Eric has joined us for segment 1 and segment 2. Right now, we are going to be talking MLB players and MLB prospects.
Yeah, I mean, the first one was full of heart. It's full of heart. We got to learn about families and philosophy and just life, man. It's good. It's worth listening to if you don't want your typical baseball podcast. You want a little bit more heart than usual. But if you like just baseball only, but you don't want to listen to the just baseball podcast, because we're trying to listen, folks. This is like your mom and pop shop. You got to support us from the ground up. We're going to talk baseball here today. We're going to talk prospects. Eric Cross dropping some knowledge. Of course, there'll be some Caleb Durbin talk. We even squeeze a little Brock Wilken in there. We do what we can. I'm not even like a Brewers fan. Like, I guess I should be at this point.
You should be. Yeah, you definitely should be. And here's the second piece of that recording. Well, and this is a perfect opportunity for us to finally get into the players, as you haven't been anticipating, Doc. Eric, I have a few names for you. A couple are within the Red Sox organization. That's really why I wanted to ask you about these guys. And then I have one from the Rangers organization. So Red Sox based Franklin Arias, and then Luis Perales. Perales, injuring the UCL last year, but an incredible profile from my perspective before the injury. And then Franklin Arias, coming on really strong and showcasing some great skills, still at a lower level. What are your thoughts on both of them, projectable moving forward? And then, post injury for Perales, do you think he gets back to form?
Yeah, I'll start with Perales. He's definitely one that I hope gets back to form because he was really skyrocketing up rankings before the injury, and unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to see him. He made 2 starts in Portland before the injury, and I believe one was on the road and the other one at home. I think like middle of the week time. I just couldn't make it because I had family obligations. So fortunately, I didn't get to see one of those 2 starts. But obviously he'll be back here at some point and later in 2025 because the Red Sox really, as we know, a lot of emphasis has been on the hitting side, which has been great. It's just given us all these studs. We've already mentioned all the names. So, but the pitching side's been a little, it's gotten better. I will say that, but Perales is supposed to be the guy that was going to become like, one of maybe not the, top tier prospect on the pitching side, but definitely maybe like a top 100 guy or something like that. And he was the one that was supposed to be it. And he's still absolutely good. He's still only 21. I think he doesn't turn 22 until sometime early next year or this year. Mike, it's already 2025. I guess I'm saying next year for 25. It's this year now. It's a few months away, start of the season. So Perales is really, really fun. Player one that I was really excited to see at Double-A before the injury because he was striking out a ton of batters. Big fastball, good 3-pitch mix. Split change is really good as well. He's got like a slider cutter hybrid too. So really like Perales. What I was seeing with him in the lower levels. I know Chris had a chance to see him. I think he saw him during his time in Greenville. He made probably 14, 15 starts there over 2 seasons. So Perales is one that I'm hoping that can.
Do you know how big he is?
Back on track. What's that?
Because I have to always jump in on these things. Baseball Reference cracks me up with their weights from anyone who's not from America.
Yep,
dude, is this guy still 160 pounds?
No, he's not. He's definitely not. Yeah, it's funny because like they get like the initial that was probably from like when he signed back in 21. That's probably from like maybe 2022 or something like that. So if I had to guess. I mean, I'm bad at this stuff, but like he's probably more like 180 now. He's not like super big, but he's definitely put on probably at least 15, 20 pounds, I'd say. But
Doc, he has a 6 foot, right? 6 foot on the money for height.
It says 6'1", so he was actually very projectable. I could see why he was supposed to be like. I'm surprised he didn't have more hype coming out from what I'm hearing right now. It looked like he was actually crushing it this year. He had some command issues and was solving them before the injury.
Yeah, no, he had strike throwing issues, in the lower levels in the minors, but walk rate was coming down this year. I mean, earlier in last year, 2024 is now last year, but you only had 12 walks in 33 and 2/3 innings. I mean, that was definitely an improvement from 50 and a little under 90 innings the previous year. So yeah, he was taking taking strides forward, and who knows, maybe he'd be a guy that we're talking about, in the same breath as we're talking about like a Quinn Matthews or a
Yeah.
Brandon
Over
Sproul or
Chandler.
someone in the maybe not like Joe or Painter or Schultz, but like maybe in that second, third tier of pitching prospects. He was kind of on that trajectory. So definitely looking forward to seeing him when he does get back. I still think, again, he's still very young, so only 21. So I definitely think he can get back to that level. And Arias, he's maybe one of the next big Red Sox prospects. I mean, I'm not gonna say he's gonna turn into next year's Christian Campbell or rise to that level or anything like that. But there's been a lot of excitement on like him and like Yoel and Cespedes, two younger level guys in the Red Sox organization, that they could be maybe top 100, maybe even top 50 guys. Arias, packs a punch already. He just turned 19 years old, had some time in low A, and hit 257. It's all right. He didn't stand out, but very young for the level, which is definitely something to factor in there too. But he's one where the surface stats weren't gaudy in low A, but they were he tore up like the DSL complex level. He was hitting 355 with a 471 OBP in 51 level games at the complex level before he got the bump to low A. So those are gaudy, but the slash line in low A Salem, not as gaudy, not as exciting. But he's one where you get really excited by the projection. Like he's still growing. He's another one who's listed at 5'11", 170. He's definitely probably grown an inch or two and added some weight since then, I think. I'm just kind of going off. I don't have any confirmation on that. He just looks bigger than that. So, but really exciting blend of tools there, and not like any super loud standout tools, but does a lot of things well across the board. It could be above average hitter, above average plus power. See where the speed ends up. He's been running a lot in the low levels of the minors. I kind of wonder if he's one of those guys that maybe loses a step as he fills out, but he should still at least bring some element of speed to the game as well. And pretty solid shortstop, though. Obviously, the Red Sox are pretty loaded in the infield, so who knows, where he kind of fits into long-term plans, or if they trade him eventually. He's only really played middle infield, so but that he's still a few years away, so that's a problem for down the road. But yeah, definitely really excited about both these guys, and maybe they're two of that next wave of the Red Sox top prospects once Anthony and Campbell and everybody have graduated to the Red Sox.
If you had to roster one right now, would you choose Cespedes or would you choose Arias?
Oh, I like them both. That's the thing. It's so hard. I do slightly lean Arias. I think
Okay.
there's a bit more projection there, but if
Same.
I recall correctly, I think they're like within 10, 15 spots apart in my overall, and they're both top 100 for me right now for fantasy purposes, obviously. So yeah, definitely like them both.
Is
Yeah,
Yolan still 5'8"?
I don't think so. I don't think he's like 6 foot or anything like that, but I think he's probably more like 5'10" now at this point. I think he is growing a little bit, but
Because he had
again,
some
it's
interest.
hard to say.
Yeah, he had some interesting pop. It's something actually I wanted to punch. I told Clegg I was punching in the air about Cole Young when y'all were talking about him on your podcast. Neither of you were in on Cole Young, and I was like, no, I love Cole Young because he's such a safe. Like I just like kind of like sometimes I like the boring guys with.
Oh yeah, he's definitely safe. Absolutely.
Because I saw him as like this what McGonagall is actually starting to flash more so at a younger age, I would say. But then I looked in the numbers, and something that I'm starting to take more and more note of is caught stealing in the minors. Because if you're getting caught, especially as you progress, it's like if you're getting caught half the time, they're not going to let you run at the big leagues. That's just not going to play. And so, yeah, we'll have to. This is way too small of a sample size with the Arias here, Arias. Steals 5, but caught stealing twice, and after having a pretty good ratio at rookie ball. So, like I said, way too early, but that'll be something to monitor. And same with Cespedes. I think it's interesting with Cespedes. I got people not really mad, but kind of like, oh, Franklin Arias not on your top 100. So people actually are putting some pressure on Franklin being there now. Cespedes was getting there, and then it's just so interesting what one injury can do, right? Just like takes your momentum out. So I think it's easier to get Cespedes. So in terms of market value, I'd go for him just because at the level they're at, they're both gambles, relatively speaking.
Well, absolutely, and it's funny you bring up the speed part because I think people think that all these guys that are super quick, like the faster you are, the more stolen bases you'll have. No, that's obviously it helps to be faster. That's a big part of it, but it's almost like 3 parts that go into a stolen base or stolen base total over a full year or for a career. It's, obviously you have to have the speed to steal base, but you also have to be efficient. And like Albert Pujols is a great example of this. He stole 16 bags 1 year. We all know that Albert Pujols was slower than what. So
Yeah.
you gotta be able to read, have that just like the IQ, which kind of is like reading pitchers and their movements and knowing when to run. That goes into it, and just having the team context. Like sometimes you get quick guys that get onto a team that maybe the manager doesn't want to run. Maybe they don't get the green light. So team context definitely factors in as well. But yeah, it's not always. Oh yeah, the guy's super fast. Maybe he gets caught a lot because he doesn't read the pitcher well and gets bad jumps and gets thrown out more than a guy that's a little bit slower than he is. So yeah, it's definitely more of a 3-part process in terms of steals. At least that's how I think of it.
It's interesting. Doc and I talked this year a lot about sprint speed from Baseball Savant. And I think going right into what you said, Wyatt Langford was a really big talking point for us this year. He has incredible ranks on a Baseball Savant for his sprint speed. What is it, Doc? It's like top 2, top 3 percentile. I mean, it's pretty
I think
gaudy.
he's 99th, if
Yeah,
at worst 98th.
It's elite. And then you look at CJ Abrams, who is not. And I know he was a talking point on one of our episodes because he was in like the 65 to
It's
70
about
range.
70. Yeah, 70.
Yeah.
I think.
And I think that goes right into what you're saying, Eric, because we know that CJ Abrams is more likely to steal 40 bags this coming year than Wyatt Langford. At least that's my opinion. So it's like, what metrics are we looking at? Is it that Wyatt Langford's sprint speed is not necessarily putting into the equation the acceleration from first to second or second to third? Is it fundamentals? Like, it isn't just speed that goes into stealing a bag. It's a lot of the nuances of, being a base stealer. And I think to what you were saying, Doc, about being caught stealing in the minors, I think there are probably guys that are way faster than others. They're getting caught more because they just haven't found that nuance yet, as opposed to, the Durbins and some of these other guys who are just crafty base stealers. They're baseball players. They have done it. Those are, I think, the range where I have a hard time evaluating, because it's almost like you need to be like Clegg. You need to be watching them at the minor league level. You need to be able to see their jumps, how they read the pitcher. The stat line isn't going to really show you that outside of the caught stealings, which you were saying, Doc.
Yeah, I'm just gonna jump in there because Wyatt Langford is such a weird guy. Like I got a little animated there for anyone watching, anyone not watching. I don't know, man. I don't know if Wyatt Langford's gonna steal. If Wyatt Langford steals 40 bases, like what is he? The number 1 player in fantasy, probably. So I don't know if he'll do that. But let's just point out that the last month of the season he stole 7, and another month of the season, I think it was June here, he stole 6 bases. So it's like, oh whoa, like that's like. If
36,
guy with,
if you average it out,
I mean, I'm just the guy with like the approach, the guy with the power, the guy with everything else that Wyatt Langford has with that sprint speed, and he's starting to run more because that was the thing with the Rangers, right? Is just that they wouldn't run because everyone was hitting so well. Well, now they missed the playoffs, so clearly things aren't going exactly so well. You got to manufacture some runs, and I think that's what we saw this year. Anyway, this is completely aside, but man, I'm so excited for Wyatt Langford. I think he's.
So I don't know if you saw my tweet about I don't know, probably 3 weeks ago. I've been kind of toying with projections and just doing it old fashioned way. I'm not smart enough to create a model or anything like that or anything. So I'm kind of like, all right, I literally just go player by player. Look at the stats, look at the metrics, maybe some other aspects. Like, all right, this is what I think they're going to do, whether it's roughly the same, up or down. And I had some fun with it. And I've done all the hitters so far. I'm still doing pitchers. And I was kind of, had a big spreadsheet with everything. And I was playing some of the filters, and I was like, all right, what players, can do this? And I was looking at runs, home runs, RBI, and steals.
Yes,
And
I saw this tweet. Yep.
Yeah, I went to 2020 and then 100. And it was Ohtani, it was Witt, it was Joe Ram, and then the fourth one was Wyatt Langford. I was like, even myself, I was like, whoa. Like, all right. I mean, I knew I love Langford. I know that, but I didn't think that I'd find that out that he was in a category with those 3. But maybe the 100 runs and RBI is bold. I totally understand that. But again, like it's bold to have me. I think my projection was like 34 home runs and 24 steals or something like that, and barely over 100 each of runs and RBI. But if you sit in the middle of that Texas lineup, I mean, the data is there, the team context is there. It's a good park. I mean, they looks like they're probably gonna hit them high, third, fourth, something like that, maybe second, but definitely up in the top part there with all the other big bats they have. I'm like, all right, I can see it. Maybe it's bold, but yeah, I love Wyatt Langford. That's why I have him ranked ahead of, Churio, the Jacksons, Churio, and Maryland. People kind of scoff at that, but I'm like, oh, he didn't have as good of a year as they did. Yeah, that's true. You look at just 2024, the two of them had better rookie years than he did. 100% agree with that. There's no way you can say that they didn't. But obviously it's not just looking at the 1 year. It's going to be some projection and other things go into it. So I'm like, I still project him better than them, and just by a little bit. They're all three of them are very, very good. But like, look at September. I think he was second in WAR behind some guy named Shohei Ohtani in September, and he was like on pace for like 40, 120, 120. Obviously, it's 1 month. You can't really read too much into that, but it kind of showed like, all right, he has that upside in him, and I'm pretty confident he can become the next stud of our game.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about 8 home runs, 7 stolen bases, and it says here Sept/October on Baseball Reference, 300 batting average, 386 OBP. I mean, it was all coming together. If you're going to pick a month to do it, I'd rather it be the last month, because this is something where actually Matt has called us out on. I had called me out on this before. Is that he's like, oh well, who's pitching to him? I'm like, well, dude, the biggest, and I'm punching back again, Matt. The biggest, the biggest sluggers in the entire league, the guys who mash all the bumps, who are they hitting off of? They're not usually mashing off of Glaz now at his, when he's healthy, or the absolute studs. They're usually mashing it off of the relievers, or maybe the sus, mid to, late end of rotation kind of guys. That's where they make their money, and so it doesn't really matter too much to me. But to me, it does matter that, like, this guy, he didn't really get a proper minor league season. This guy got thrown in there. And heck, I have this weird kooky theory where I think college players in some ways have a disadvantage to a guy like maybe James Woods, who comes in at 18 years old and actually has like a professional organization overseeing his entire development, essentially, versus, Langford, who's like, you come out of college, you got to hope that college really knows what they're doing. And clearly they do, because he's doing pretty well. You get figured it out. But if at the end of a long, grueling year, with injuries, which explains a lot of the issues he had, I mean, if you're gonna do it in September of all months, after all of that, going against you, it's very impressive, very exciting. So again, yeah, he actually won me a deep league where I held on to a 20 man redraft. So, well, him and that other guy, what was his name? Yeah, you're right, Ohtani. Yeah, that guy helped too. Also, yeah. I really recommend going back in a time machine and picking Sale and Skeens.
Yeah. That definitely would be a good thing to do. But yeah, like if Langford had that hot month in July and hit like 240 in September, a whole different ballgame of how he's being talked about.
Sure.
This offseason for sure. Yeah. So yeah, if you're gonna have the biggest month of your young career and of your first rookie year, September is definitely a pretty fun month to do it in.
Well, so you probably weren't able to follow along with our in-season debate about Wyatt Langford there, Eric, because I was pretty bold. I was frustrated with Wyatt Langford's FYPD placement the year before. Like, he was, I think, industry standard 1-1, right? Skeens, Yamamoto in certain drafts based off need, kind of like we talked about earlier, could have challenged him. But it was such an incredible draft class, 2023. I think if you put Langford in 8 of 10 other draft classes in FYPDs for fantasy, I'm extremely happy with the year that he had in the projectability. But what Doc was referencing was I had put together his 7 home runs, if I'm correct, in September, and 5 of the 7 were against players that were probably quad A players. Now I'm in agreement. All players have to hit and swing and perform against the same amount of guys. That's no question, whatever. But when I really looked at it, I was like, okay, I personally would have rather had Langford do it in July, when at least I know he's hitting against a put together rotation, even if it's scrapped together based off injuries. When I look at projecting Langford forward, it's like, darn it, you're right. He's probably 270, 280, 30 home runs, 25 stolen bases based off September's numbers. My thought was, what if he is the guy that we saw before the injury, even with a little bit more projectability? Did I really want to burn my 1-1 in an FYPD when I have guys like Walker Jenkins, Luis DeVries, Paul Skeens? So I'm still torn. I really love the projection that you guys have put together for Wyatt Langford. I absolutely think it's reasonable. I think the likelihood is he is a star. It's just hard when you look back on that 2023 class, because there could be 4 or 5 Hall of Famers in this class. And I don't say that lightly. Like, this class was one of the best maybe of all time.
Yeah,
And
he
Langford,
had this terrible September when he was only 22 years old. You know, I mean, it's kind of. I mean, actually, no, that's kind of old, right? Isn't 22 a little old? Could be doing.
but
Gosh,
you
I love
get what
ripping.
I'm saying.
I love getting into it with Matt about
There's,
Langford.
I guess my point
we
is
had an absolute showdown. No, Matt, I understand what you're saying.
there's two sides to the coin, right? We can look at September's numbers and we can look at them with projectability and say that's our guy, or we can look at them with a little bit of hesitation and say, okay, we know we can do it at the major league level. Now, can he do it in the years that come? I think, Eric, to your point, Jackson Holiday didn't have injuries, struggled mightily for 2 months, and then finally started to really adapt himself to the major league level. Well, Wyatt Langford had the back injury, or the hamstring injury, excuse me, and that kind of delayed the projection that we saw with Jackson Chourio. So I do believe that Wyatt Langford has the opportunity to surpass Jackson Chourio next year. Definitely Jackson Merrill. That's a whole nother conversation.
You talking about
But,
Holiday or Merrill?
um,
I can understand it. We're talking about 3 different Jacksons right now.
Merrill and Chourio. Holiday is out of the equation.
Jackson's the cool name. Jackson
Yeah.
Joe. Everyone's calling it a Jackson apparently.
Yeah, it was definitely like a birth year where the parents were just stumbling upon the same name.
Yep.
But anyways, we've talked about Wyatt Langford long enough. The next name I wanted to bring up for you, Eric, before I pass it off to Doc for you guys to talk about your names, is another younger player. It's another lineage player. It's Pablo Guerrero for the Texas Rangers organization. Really picked up his metrics, his underlying data, his exit velocity this season. A name that a lot of people I don't think are talking about or are just starting to talk about. What are your thoughts on Guerrero, and where do you have him within your rankings?
Yeah, Pablo Guerrero is a fun one. Obviously, you mentioned the lineage with the family. Obviously Guerrero carries a lot of weight in the prospect world and in the dynasty world. And yeah, he's one where I'm surprised he didn't get more hyped up. I mean, there's a little bit of hype around him, but even now, you don't see Pablo Guerrero ranked super high. I mean, at least not yet. It's starting to get there, but he's only 18 too, so he's not. He's been around for a while. He's been around, I think, 2 years now, DSL in 2023, and then a little bit of complex, a little bit of low A last year. But you see that, that big projectable frame. I think he's like 6'3", still could probably put on another 15, 20 pounds of muscle and turn into another slugging, corner infield or corner outfield type. So I think he's played both spots. I think more so first base than corner outfield. But you see the potential future outcome for him being, middle of the order, plus power bat. I don't think he's going to bring any speed to the table. He's not that type of guy, especially if he continues to fill out. I mean, he's already doesn't bring much speed anyway. That bat is going to have to carry him, and especially the power. And then you got to hope, like, all right, is he just a power guy, like a power only guy, or can he hit for a respectable average as well? Because that's what so many prospects, something I've been putting more value into, is can this guy make contact? I've been burned by so many flashy, like, oh, look at the power, and like Will Benson's a recent example, like, oh, he's so fun, he's strong, he's quick, he's athletic. Yeah, but he can't hit the broadside of a barn. So I put so much more stock into that over the last few years, especially. And Guerrero's contact rates, I think, are okay. I think they're around like 70, 71%, which is, a little bit on the lower side, but nothing that I'm like really super concerned about yet. And it doesn't really strike out too much either. He kept the K rate in check, but it did go up as the season went on a little bit, but not a huge concern either. But so it's still kind of a X factor there. Where does the hit tool wind up? Where does the average wind up? But I think he's a great buy right now. I think I have him in the. I think I have him back end top 200, I believe, right now. But definitely could be top 100 if that hit tool comes along. If he continues to increase the power, and he's one where like the level of power he's capable of doesn't really match like the home run totals you've seen. Like he had 8 home runs last year in 78 games. No one's gonna look at that, or even any of his stats really be like, oh yeah, I want to go out and get Pablo Guerrero. But you look at, all right, this projection here, there's a lot more power than that 8 home runs in, a little under half of a season would indicate. This guy could be like a 25, 30 homer guy down the road. And Texas has done a pretty good job of developing hitting prospects over the last, half decade or so. So I like him a lot. I think he could jump up, maybe be like a back end top 100 guy at some point, later on in 2025.
It's funny you brought up Will Benson. I drove down to Arizona last year, right at the tail end of spring training, and I caught a game where he went probably 420, 430 off a lefty. And I said, yep, there it is. That's what I needed to see. His slash against lefties was terrible. This is it. This is his year. And I had just bought into the narrative that I wanted. But it is fun to watch him live because look at Will Benson's 2024. Terrible, right? Just it didn't show any of the potential that some of us in the industry had hoped to maybe even just a slight uptick in average was going to provide. And that might just be who he is. And I think that's the risk, right? Guerrero could turn into a guy that struggles to hit 220, but can still hit the ball 450. At 18, it is hard, much like Arias, to really look at these guys and say, hey, what do they look like when they hit double in AAA? Like, are they going to be able to translate these skills? Because contact is such an important aspect of that market. Okay, well, I'm going to pass it off to you, Doc. Dive into some of your guys that you had wanted to talk to Eric about.
Yeah, I mean, first, I'll just say that I think we all wanted Will Benson to succeed, and it's not out of the realm. In this podcast, we love our 26 to 29-year-old breakouts. It can happen. It can happen. Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I expect he's got it all, right? Other than hitting the football, hitting the baseball. That's the problem with late night. I'm a morning guy. I was up at 3 a.m. this morning. But, he's got good makeup, too. Gosh, I just love so much about him. So we were all rooting for him. But, he's going to have a long road ahead of him. With Guerrero, I just want to say that, like, the bloodlines mean something. I'm definitely interested. In part because of that. We know who his father was. If there's any guy who forgot how to use condoms, it's like, that's the guy, man. Vladimir Guerrero. It's like, we have so many sons. That's the most edgy joke we've ever said in the history of this podcast. We wanted you to be here for it, Eric.
I'm honored. I'm honored.
Yes. And so, no, funny enough, I'm a little bit more curious about Brailer Guerrero, who I'm not going to sit here and talk about today, but since I'm usually a pitching specialist, and I do have some pitchers on here, we're not going to say all my guys. We'll maybe do one or two, but let's get into Caleb Bonemer, just because we were talking about FYPD guys earlier, and if I just said Caleb Bonemer, and listeners out there said who, Snoop Dogg Beam, who? Listen, my sleeperish kind of guy of the draft is actually Luke Dickerson. But since Matt Morris here sniped him from me in our FYPD, I actually was forced to pivot. I was forced, and so this is a very practical application. By the way, this is a good evidence of like when you're being bold versus like what's in practice, right? Are you going to hype some guy up? Well, you actually take him where you think he is. And so for me, a big thing I do when it comes to scouting, since I can't be at every single prep game, I know I'm crazy for that. I do look at signing bonuses. And so I look at a guy like Luke Dickerson. Why are you breaking the bank for Luke Dickerson? Oh, he literally looks like Mike Trout. He's from New Jersey. He's got all these tools, so I could talk about him all day. But Caleb Bonemer is like another guy. He's 6'1", I think about 200-ish kind of pounds. He's got this really solid look. He's kind of like Luke Dickerson. He's actually a little bit taller. And I looked at something I got to start using more is the perfect game numbers. My goodness, he's got measurables that are actually better EVs than Max Clark did in his perfect game performances or his metrics on there in terms of EVs. But yeah, he's got a crazy arm. It's crazy. I was talking to Matt before the show. So many of these studs like Dickerson, Clark, and Bonemer were 3 guys I looked up. They all they basically throw like a 90+ mile per hour fastball. It's like these guys are crazy. They're such freaks. The cream of the crop. And Bonemer's going like, we did a 30-man FYPD and he went like kind of deep in the 3rd round, I think. People aren't thinking about him. He is with the Chicago White Sox. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. He's with the Chicago White Sox. But at the end of the day, if you're gonna get that kind of a discount for a player with the upside of, he's just got a solid projectable frame. He's got unbelievable speed. He's basically as fast as Max Clark, from what I can tell. He's got a heck of an arm, which means he could stick at shortstop. Worst case scenario is third base, which is not like some kind of like fantasy wonderland anymore. I think Caleb Bonemer could be a guy who maybe sneaks up on us. And again, guys, this is the reason I want to talk about him is because he was basically second to Luke Dickerson in terms of, I think he got about $3 million in a signing bonus, which would put him ahead of guys in the first round, if I'm correct. That's someone worth taking note of. And if they're going to give you that discount of being on the White Sox, man, it's like they're eventually going to need a hitter. And if you want to look on the real bright side of it, they're really going to need a hitter. So he's going to get opportunity. Eric, have you done any looks into, at least dives into Caleb Bonemer?
Yeah, no, Bonemer is one of those guys that like his profile, I think, always gets overlooked because in general, like there's not like the one wow tool, but he just does so many things well. This is not a direct comp, but it's kind of gives me like, and he actually kind of has a similar build to him. I think like he's a little taller, but like a Matt Shaw. I'm not saying he's gonna be a top 10 prospect one day. That's not what I'm saying here. Oh, who knows? He could be, but Shaw doesn't have anything that stands out. But he just does so many things well on the diamond, especially what way we want to see on the plate, at the plate, and on the bases. That's kind of like what Bonemer I think could be. Obviously, we get to see how he does in minor league action here, but he definitely has that all-around skill set where he could be one of those guys that always sneaks up on you. And I think the team context is I'm glad you brought that up because some team, and even at the major league level, you just get good values on guys. I think the White Sox suck, I'm not gonna go after a White Sox prospect, or we all Rockies prospects is a good one to use. Like certain teams aren't as good as others in developing, but that doesn't mean you should avoid every prospect in their system. Like Noah Schultz, freaking love Noah Schultz, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. So Bonemer, that could be a really fun left side of the infield. In a couple of years with him and Colson Montgomery, depending on how they want to flip flop them at short and third. But yeah, he definitely does a lot of things well. I think he's a sneaky good target in your FYPD if you haven't had that yet. I think I have him. I'm trying to see. I'm pulling up my rankings here, where I have Bonemer in. Yeah, I have him like in the mid 20s, and I think you can probably get him even lower than that. Probably get him more like in the 30s range or so. As people look at the White Sox, look at the the draft selection, which I think he went in the mid 40s. I think for overall pick in the draft, and even though that shouldn't really play much of a factor, it kind of does. People see that they weren't drafted super highly. Like, oh, he's not a first round guy. I'm gonna look at a first round guy. But there's definitely a lot of good tools there. He does a lot of things well. I think he can stick it short or go to third, play either position, and just give you a good all around production. So yeah, I definitely think Bonemer's a fun one for sure.
Eric, when you're looking at Bonemer, JD Dickerson, the kid for the Phillies that has been pretty well touted, we talked about a few weeks ago. How are you deciding if you're in the second round of an FYPD, like which one you take? Is it purely off your rankings? And I guess, how are you ranking these guys when they all have such a similar profile, different maybe projections here and there, right? More power here, more higher defensive level here. So, more intended playing time potentially. Like, what is the one skill you're looking for out of the high school prep guys to say, that's the guy I'm going to rank higher in FYPD and that's the guy I'm going to draft?
I think when all things put together, I used to kind of go back to that hit tool. I mean, which one of these guys has a better feel to hit? Because even a couple years ago, I got burned. Like I'd have to apologize profusely to anybody that drafted like Elijah Green, number 2 overall in their FYPDs because of my ranking or my recommendation. Because I bought into like, oh, this guy looks like is a physical freaking specimen. Can hit the ball country mile and can outrun 99% of players out there. But the guy can't hit a ball to save his life. So, and it's not, I don't think there's any like massive difference in these guys. So it's almost kind of what is your philosophy? What's your style of playing? I mean, especially when you get to this point, like let's say it's a 12 team, league, or even like a 15. So you're probably getting like either your second pick or maybe even your third pick. It's like, all right, is it just purely upside play at that point? Do you want to go after, more of a go after a Braylon Payne, who he's probably been pushed up a little higher than this at this point? Do you want to go after, a Tyson Lewis? You want to go after, a PJ Merlando and go super upsidey? Or do you want to go after a guy that you feel better is going to, become a major league hitter? So that's why I always kind of lean. I used to lean towards the more flashy, like Merlando types, and this is not a knock on him, but and I've kind of more gone over to more of the Bonemer types because kind of look at what's worked more often. It's not it's not cut and dry. Like it can go either way. We know that, but like what's worked more often, and what do I already have in my team? Do I have a couple guys I feel good about? maybe I'll go more flashy. But yeah, Bonemer types I found work, more often than not. So I kind of lean towards those guys now.
I love what you said there. I've tried to cut you off. You didn't let me do it. I love that you did that. You got to be on watch. I think I coughed. I think I sneezed once with Clegg and he stopped talking. I was like, "Oh, bro, I got you, dude. I got the drop on you today." I mean, no, go with your gut at some point. Don't go crazy. Don't go 100. Don't go 50 slots out of where you should be. But if you have a style, I think you said style, and it's like, yeah, you need to have your own approach. You need to be happy to go down with this ship. Frankly, if you see Elijah Green there and you have red flags. And you're like, I just don't know about this profile. But everyone in the industry has him so high. It's like you're gonna hate yourself if that doesn't work out. And there's definitely some people out there who feel that right now. By the way, Brock Wilken, I'm not quitting on Brock Wilken yet. He's not Elijah Green.
I'm not quitting on him either. I mean, he got hit in the face.
Yeah, he got hit in the face. 20 PAs against younger competition last year. Just saying.
Right. You got to think that mental aspect. And I played baseball up through high school. And I got hit not in the face, but kind of like chin, neck area one time, and I was like, shit. Like I was like 15 too, so I was like, I don't want to. It's like the whole mental side of it. And
Yep.
You're getting hit, having you can get a broken orbital bone or cheekbone. What exact bone he ended up breaking? He actually came back a lot quicker than I thought. He was running out for like 3 weeks or whatever. But I mean, obviously the power is still there, and you saw the gains that he made like that last year at Wake Forest, where he was making more contact, he was walking more, he was striking out less, all while still having the elite power. Like he didn't sacrifice any of his power. So yeah, I think he's a good buy. I'm definitely still in on Wilken with you there, Doc.
What position did you play in high school?
I was mostly corner and field. I did a little first, little third. I also have one of my best friends. He is super tall. He played first base a lot. So I was kind of more so third base. A little bit outfield too, but primarily corner. I tried pitching a little bit. Didn't really have the command. One of my good friends that's in my home keeper league will always rave about the time that he had the block like 8 of my pass balls in the dirt or something like that. Which is maybe a little bit of exaggeration, but not by much. But yeah, I didn't really have the command or the control for pitching, even though I wanted to. It was always super fun to pitch. But yeah, I love third base though. It kept you on your toes. Like, all right, you gotta be ready. You dive one way, dive the other way. It was really a fun position, and I loved getting backhand in it, whipping it across the diamond. That was always fun for me. So third base was a very fun position for me to play.
It's interesting, when you talk about that, what comes to mind for me is just my own playing experience, and then thinking about some of the names that you guys just talked about, and how the reality is some of those guys, at least at their high school non-travel teams, they're playing against what would have been us, right? And then so trying to evaluate them based off geographically where they are, the level of competition within their conference, it's like you really have to know who they were playing against. If guys from, and I think that's why I like Orange County kids for the longest time, kids from Texas, right? Florida, they were and still are higher rated prep players than a guy like JD Dix out of Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin, where
a guy like Bonemer out of Michigan, just for the record.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, I know the competition level within Whitefish Bay's conference. It's literally people like me. Now that hurts his draft stock for me. I took him in a couple FYPDs because I like the profile, but I'm like, maybe that's why Gavin Lux and Jared Kelnick just didn't ever live up to their prospect pedigree, because they just didn't have the same level of exposure that the kids from Texas, Florida, California have. Do you think that goes into your decision when you do rankings, or maybe you're taking an FYPD?
A little bit, because obviously we know there's definitely more baseball hotbeds. I do not live in a baseball hotbed. Maine isn't exactly any sports hotbed. Maybe hockey or skiing because it's cold as heck up here. But though Cooper Flagg, #1 pick in the NBA draft next year, is from Maine originally, so we got that going for us. But yeah, no, it definitely factors in. Especially where it doesn't make me adjust my ranking on a player, so to speak. But maybe you see a kid that's from like Florida or like Southern California, always played in warm weather. Then they get drafted into a system where low A is in Michigan or so it's like, all right, or like it's up in like New Jersey or Washington State. It's like, all right, they struggle initially. I'm like, all right, you keep in mind, like, they haven't really dealt with this. They haven't really dealt with playing in, 40-degree weather. They're used to playing in 60, 70, 80, whatever degree weather. So kind of just like, all right, maybe don't go crazy and, say he's a bust or drop him down my rankings too far. Like, all right, let's see what happens when it, gets to be June, July, August, and see if they they turn it on as the weather gets hotter. So yeah, definitely something I definitely keep in mind in those instances, but it doesn't let me, adjust my rankings too much on a player.
Yeah, let me jump on this. This is something that we work for Scout. The Stat Line is a very analytical company, but like Matt and I are we kind of like to bridge the old school with the new school. And frankly, it's something that the models don't always show. And that is this cold weather factor. And so as much as there could be situations where maybe, these guys aren't getting maybe the premium competition or as many reps, I think it's also somewhere where you can maybe get value, where it's interesting. You look at a guy like Thomas White. Oh, I'm the biggest Thomas White fan in the whole world. It's unbelievable. The guy was a prodigy. You might have heard about him in high school. He's whipping like 91 as a 14-year-old. Guy was a stud, and then just COVID kind of well, everyone else is building podcasts. This guy's out here like, what's happening to my career? He's like, I was getting so much hype. But because he's a cold weather arm, he's just not playing as much. He's just not getting as much shine. And so even in a hotbed, like, near in the state where the Boston Red Sox call their home. And so Thomas White is still to this day underrated, like Travis Sakura. I also love Travis Sakura, but he's getting way more hype than White, even though White did it actually at a higher level. An aside, but yeah, I think it's worth noting that as much as you're higher risk, higher reward, you can get some crazy values because the scouts, frankly, the scouts do take this all into effect. That's why they love their Texas guys. That's why they love their California guys.
Yep.
And Matt, if you want, we're running an hour 30 here. I'm just good. Matt, you want to just list off all the guys we have here? We have your guys, my guys, Eric's guys, and let's just let Eric choose because he's our guest. I want to make him I want to let him pick a guy or two.
Yeah. So I'm going to bypass my list just because I think we've talked about them on recent episodes, and honestly, they're names that we've heard in the industry before. So I'll move into yours and Eric's.
Oh man, we just want to say we love Aidan Smith around here. We just want to say we love Aidan.
We
Smith.
do. We do love Aidan Smith. Yeah. Okay. I'll throw Aidan Smith in then. So Aidan Smith, Casey Hunt from Milwaukee. I'm actually not familiar with Kohl Drake. Kohl Drake's going to be on the list. Elizabeth Diaz, Josh Stevenson. Moving on to your list, Eric, Drake Baldwin, Alan Roden, Vance Honeycutt, Jarlin Susana, and then Nick Yorke. So, touch on whoever you want within that list.
Yeah, a lot of fun names here. But Aidan Smith, obviously formerly Seattle, now at the Tampa Bay Rays, came over in the Rose deal, and he's one where I think he's a bit underrated right now because he doesn't have like the huge power. I think if any one tool is to drive up a player's value more than the others, it's probably the power tool. And Aidan Smith, he's got sneaky little power. Like he could be like a 15, 18 homer guy at peak, but he gets on base at a really good clip. Obviously, he walks a good amount, solid contact skills, and he's a plus athlete as well. He plays good outfield defense. He's a plus or better runner. That does a lot of things well where he doesn't need to be a 25 homer guy. So, yeah, I have Smith as a top 50 prospect right now, and I don't think that's consensus at this point, though I know others have him that high as well. But I don't think that, I would say the perceived value is king. It doesn't matter what you think a player is when you're trying to, in trade talks. It matters what the other manager thinks the player's value is. So I think his perceived value is probably more like 75 to 100 range. But I think I have him in the mid to late 40s right now. Yeah, so I think he's definitely a good buy for sure. Kohl Drake and Casey Hunt. It's funny, like those are two. Everyone talks about the bigger breakouts from this past year, right? Like the Alejandro Rosarios, the Quinn Matthews, etc., the Travis Sakuras, all those types of guys. But there's like this other kind of wave of these breakout guys that had really good years. A lot of guys in the Texas org had really good years. Like you look at a lot of just look at like minor league K- walk rate for just something to look at. And Kohl Drake finished super high on there. Rosario led the minor leagues in K- walk rate. So I don't project Drake to be like a stud, but Drake's a starter, a major league starter for sure, which is more than you can say about a lot of these guys. Even some of the more highly ranked guys, Like I just wrote up the Baltimore Orioles today for my Patreon, and I was writing Chase McDermott. I'm like, yeah, McDermott's stuff is fun, but is he a starter? I don't think so. I think he's a bullpen guy because he walks so many guys and can't command his pitches. So Drake's definitely a major league starter and one that's kind of got sneaky value there. So I like Drake a lot. Casey Hunt had a really good year as well. He's a little bit on the older side, which I think plays into it. Though so is Quinn Matthews. I think they're both 24, if I recall correctly. But look at what Hunt did this year across 3 levels. 2.03 ERA. WHIP was under 1. Really good. He almost had 7 times as many walks. Excuse me, 6 times as many walks as strikeouts. 139 to 25. Guy that has never been. Guy that had a lot of walks, so he can limit damage that way. It doesn't give up a lot of home runs. Only 6 home runs allowed this year. So, maybe more of a high floor guy. I don't think he's like the super high upside, but Casey Hunt, Kohl Drake, these types they're going to be major league starters. And, these are bigger guys too. Like Drake's, I think 6'4", 6'5", and Hunt, I think is like 6'3", 6'4" right below him. So definitely like fun, predictable, those tall arms that we like seeing. So yeah, those are 2 very definitely, and I'm probably still even ranking them too low. In my rankings too. I think I'm guilty of that as well. So definitely those were 2 really good calls there with Hunt and Drake, Doc, for sure.
Yeah, let me get in on this because we're having fun now.
Yeah,
that was good rapid fire. I love the rapid fire. Sometimes we have some guests on. They love their guy. They want to talk about 20 minutes. I'm like, well, now we have no time for other guys. So,
right.
Aidan Smith. I think people forget that this guy stole 41 bases this year. It's like, okay, and this is a situation where I kind of fell in love with the scout's description of him. Where some guys say he's Texas's best prep hitter this year. I'm like, well, hold up. Texas is basically a country and they all love baseball. So it's like, that's not a small thing. And so immediately I was like, yeah, let me get him wherever I could. And I grabbed him pretty early. Honestly, sometimes trusting the scouts can help. And now we have a situation where the analytics love him. So it's like best of all worlds. And so that's just a lot of fun going to Tampa. We'll see how long, he's been with Seattle and Tampa, the 2 organizations who love just dealing their prospects at all costs. So we'll see where he really ends up, but a lot of upside there. Speed and approach and hit tool all seem to be in play, and the power, oh my gosh, like the ceiling is crazy. I traded him to Matt Morris here. I did not want to do that in the league, but I had to do it. League context. Casey Hunt and Kohl Drake, exactly what you said. They're both big body arms, both 24 years old. But frankly, with a pitcher, it's like pitchers often break out at like they take to like 26, 27, 28 quite often. Then they'll pitch for 10 years. Like, what do you want 10 years of a good player or not? And I would say especially worth noting with Casey Hunt. He actually was a position player. He was doing both until 2023. He even had 4 games batting still with Milwaukee in 2023. So pretty recently, he just fully went on a focus on pitching. That seems to have paid off. You can knock ERA all you want, 2.03 ERA across 102 innings. That'll play. He's barely walking anyone. He's striking out a lot of guys. Casey Hunt, I have him pretty high. Kohl, I think he's going to climb a lot this year if he can continue this. Kohl Drake decided to do everything he could to be like hidden. He didn't want anyone to know about him. He went to Russellville, Arkansas Tech University, and also went to Morristown, Tennessee. This guy just didn't want anyone to know about him. So he could be a value for himself in fantasy leagues. That's smart. And so, no, he's a great story if it all works out. He went up, so you want to see how these older guys, you want to see how they perform at the higher levels. Casey Hunt crushed AA. Kohl Drake, his walk rate did creep up and his strike rate did creep down in AA. Very small sample size, 20 innings, still at a 3.10 ERA. Of course, that can be kind of malleable, but so if I want to say something, I'm definitely ranking Casey Hunt ahead of Kohl Drake. But Kohl Drake, nevertheless, this is a great story. You can get Kohl Drake anywhere. So those are my guys. Yeah, Eric, talk about some of the guys you put on your list.
Yeah, but first of all, what are you badmouthing the powerhouse that is Arkansas Tech? Like, what's going on here, Doc?
I love Arkansas. I think I blew a tire there once. I have some family there. I think I blew a tire and went to the Russellville Walmart, and that's a real story. And they made me wait 4 hours, and I was pretty pissed off that day because it shouldn't have taken that long. Gosh, I swear I actually blew a tire in a town of 50 people. And I'm just gonna say it. There was an old Southern flag hanging in the town square still there. That's where we were, and
Oh, wow,
we,
yeah.
yeah. If you can know what that is, and so I got these kind people there in a church parking lot, literally the only church in the next like 10 miles around. Helped me put my spare tire on because I'm a loser, and I learned something that day, and I managed to make it down to Russellville, Arkansas, where I ran into Kohl Drake, and he told me to put him on my fantasy list. No, it's not true, but yeah, but everything else
break out.
Yeah. No, anyway, I'm there with you.
Yeah. So the guys I had on here, Drake Baldwin, Alan Roden, Vance Honeycutt, Jarlin Susana, and Nick Yorke. Which is funny. Nick Yorke is a guy that I used to be. When he was a Red Sox prospect, I saw a lot of him in AA. Was not. I mean, I didn't dislike him, but I wasn't ranking him super highly either. But he's done a lot of good over the last year or so. Now over with Pittsburgh. I mean, in AAA, he was hitting the ball hard. He I think had a hard hit rate around 45%, and not a lot of barrels. He's hitting too many things on the ground, but solid contact skills. He's always been a solid contact guy with a good approach, and not flashy by any means, but he's gonna get some run in Pittsburgh, whether it's at second base or maybe corner outfield slot where he's played a little bit lately as well. So I think Nick Yorke is a good value right now. But I think one of the more undervalued catching prospects, or maybe one of the more undervalued prospects in general right now, is Drake Baldwin. And I was even guilty of that up until recently. I didn't have him ranked like super high. But look at what he did in AAA for Atlanta. And obviously, he's blocked by Sean Murphy, but Travis d'Arnaud is gone. So maybe you see Baldwin get some time there. And if Murphy goes down, I like Baldwin a lot because in AAA, his contact rate was around 77%, pretty good. That's above average. Hard hit rate was 53%, average EV around 93 miles an hour, and a 10.5% barrel rate. I mean, he's one where you look at the overall stat line, and it's good, but doesn't wow you. So, and it's easy to see why he's a little bit old. I think he's 23, maybe almost 24 now. So, not a super young guy with projection either. But this is like a good hitter. This is going to be a guy that could be above average hit, above average to plus power as well. And he's major league ready now. It's just a matter of having a spot, whether it be DH, which maybe won't be because Marcell Ozuna is there, or catching if Murphy's hurt or as a backup catcher. But I like Baldwin a lot. I think he's really undervalued. Like, I have him as I think my 5th or 6th catcher in my prospect rankings. So like Baldwin a lot. And then Jarlin Susana is one. I love off season, so I can really dig into prospects profiles more. We know during the season stuff's always changing. More games are happening, metrics are changing, stats are changing, so everything's always evolving. So it's nice to have everything's stagnant right now. Nothing's changing. These are the stats. These are the metrics. And there's always several players when I'm slicing and dicing and going through positionally or team wise. I'm going through teams now. There's always players that I end up liking a lot more or less, and like McGonigal, I like a lot more than I did 3 months ago, and Susana as well. Like, I started watching even more film on Susana, and it's like, man, this guy is really, really electric. Obviously, fastball that hits triple digits like regularly. And you look at the surface ERA was I think 434, 131 whip. Those don't stand out, but you look under the hood, it was a 235 FIP. 255 xFIP. He had a minor league leading swinging strike rate of 17.5% and a ground ball rate right around 60%. So he's got huge upside. And yet he's not one that's off the radar totally. I mean, obviously there's some hype around him, but I have him as my 16th pitching prospect, which I think is higher than most. And I think if he keeps showing improvements with the command and control, I mean, he could be one we're talking about as like a top 5 pitching prospect next year. So yeah, Susana definitely a name that I'm trying to get everywhere I can. And then Roden and Honeycutt real quick here. Roden and the guy that I liked a lot more. I looked at this guy makes a lot of good contact. He's got around average power, doesn't stand out. But he kind of reminds me, the last couple of years we've had these like older sneaky guys for Toronto. And 2 years ago it was what was his name? Davis Schneider. I was completely blanking for a second. Obviously he fell off this past year, but he had a good run with them. Last year was Spencer Horwitz. So I think Roden could be that next guy. either at a first base or probably more so a corner outfield slot that could come up and kind of surprise some people because he's a major league hitter. It might not be flashy, but he's a guy that could provide you value right away. And I like to try to sprinkle in the Allen Roden types in my teams because you can get them for pretty cheap price tag, and you can get some sneaky value from them. Honeycutt's the exact opposite of that. Like Honeycutt I just wrote about him today with Baltimore. 4 of his 5 tools are really good. He's plus power. He's double plus speed. He's really good defensively in center field with a good arm. All values, tools that teams value a lot, but the hit tool, contact skills were a question coming out of North Carolina, which is kind of why you saw like a wide range of rankings for him on FYPD last year. And he didn't really help his case by having I think it was like a 58% contact rate. It was like 20 games, so not like a huge sample size, but didn't really do anything to disprove the doubters, so to speak. So he's one where he's going to need to hit more. Absolutely cut the K rate down. But the rest of the profile is so damn good that if he can even sniff like a 45 grade, like even 40 to 45 grade hit tool and only be like a 245, 250 hit or something like that, where the rest of the game is so good, he could still turn into a really fun player and a really fun fantasy player too. So Honeycutt, I mean, it's not a huge price tag, and if it doesn't work out, I don't think you'll be too upset because you didn't really put a lot of capital into acquiring him. But man, like the potential ROI and a guy like Honeycutt is huge. So if it works out, that's gonna be something you're really happy. Like hey, I went and got him when the value was a little bit down. So Honeycutt, we'll see. Big boom bust factor here with him, but one that I'm willing to kind of roll the dice on.
Yeah, and with Honeycutt, I think something that a lot of the FYP fantasy community is not putting into the equation is he has a clutch gene in him like I have not seen in college baseball when it comes to big games. He was a big time football player, so I think that probably plays into his gamer mentality. And if you're right, if he can hit 240 with that plus clutch ability, he'll play and have a 10-15 year major league career because of those plus skills. It's just, can he get to that 240, right? Like, can like you said, can he get to the 40-45 grade? Because you dream on him. And I think what you were saying with the projectability and kind of the value with where his stock is, and we were talking high schoolers earlier, it's like they're kind of in the same bag where it's like, okay, the high schoolers need to continue to develop. Honeycutt has developed everything outside of the hit. So I think when I look at where he has been taken so far, it's a great range. Like, you're happy to lose that pick, kind of as you said, for a potential 4-category game changer that will solidify your dynasty roster and be a plug-in player if he can hit. Doc, I've been down on Drake Baldwin so far this year, but Eric, some of the numbers you just threw at me, that contact rate mixed with the 93 average EV, that's, to your point, elite. Like that is stuff that gets me really excited. And I'm definitely gonna have to change my rankings on him because I didn't realize his numbers were so elite at that level. I mean, you're talking about Mark Vientos exit velocity there. That's with a better contact rate. That's something to be really propped up. So I appreciate that. What did you think of Eric's names on the list today, Doc?
Oh man, hey, don't say the name Mark Vientos, or I'll have to trade for him in every single league like I did with Mark Vientos. Yeah, gosh, this guy's gonna be so good. He's gonna hit 40 home runs this year. It's gonna be crazy. I'm not even.
I love Vientos too.
Yeah.
I use my savior at third base in a lot of leagues because I whiffed at third base last year. Like I was going hard on Noel V. I was going hard on Key Brian Hayes. I was going hard on Berger, which didn't work out until like August. So yeah, but I picked up Vientos in some leagues, including in Keeper Dynasty, and he was a big savior. So yeah, I have a lot of love for Mark Vientos.
Oh man, yeah.
Do you guys think that Brett Beatty can maybe not mimic what Vientos did, but like provide value in a way that Vientos wasn't expecting? Because I think a lot of people had Vientos kind of dead in the water because of his lack of contact. And I feel like from a prospect perspective, everyone's kind of out on Beatty now too. But same organization, you could see similar changes to the profile. What are your thoughts?
Beatty's a tough one because I've seen Beatty as best. I've seen Beatty as worst. I've seen him in Double-A. I've seen him in the AFL. He's one where I want to believe because I've seen him hit the ball really hard. Like his hard hit rates have been always really good. with Beatty, but there was a ground ball issue, wasn't elevating enough. Then came a strikeout issue. So it's always like at least one notable thing holding him back. So I don't know. I'm not out on Beatty. 100% not out on Beatty by any means. Am I a little less optimistic now than I was 2 years ago? That's fair to say, but I just wonder if is he out of chances? I mean, obviously,
Yes. Yeah.
the Mets are obviously looking to win now. They spent like $1 jillion on Juan Soto. They're looking to win now, and maybe if Vientos hadn't had the breakout last year, maybe you see another shot for Beatty. But I feel like he's one of those guys, kind of like Miguel Vargas was with the Dodgers. I think he needs a change of scenery. Just get him any results, fresh start. Maybe more of a smaller market team. Trade him to I don't know, like the Royals or Pittsburgh. I hate using those teams, but it fits. Like, give him a chance where he can actually play without super pressure of being in New York. Give him a new start, new organization. Maybe they could find something, a tweak that needs to be made. Get fresh eyes on Brett Beatty. So yeah, I think that he's definitely one where I'm like kind of filing away to let's circle back on him, in 6 months or something like that.
Well, it's hard with Vientos when you look at going into 2024. Ronnie Mauricio's ACL injury, I think, really opened the door to him having that opportunity, right? Because it was either him or Beatty. Mauricio probably would have challenged both of them, depending on how the Mets wanted to play their infield. And coming into 2025, it's like, well, Mauricio will be back. So if they've already soured on Beatty and Mauricio can even scratch 240, 250 with his added extra skill set, the likelihood, I think, is that they would go with Mauricio as that infield option. And I just bring up Beatty with Vientos because, again, I had Vientos almost written off going into 2024. The only reason I'm thinking about Beatty as a potential, post-hype sleeper is because we saw Vientos really change the concerns we had, which was incredible, whether it was to do with that conversation with Bryce Harper or not. But
I was going to say, thank you, Bryce Harper.
Yeah, thank you, rival teammate. But yeah, that's enough about Beatty. What else did you think, Doc, about some of the guys Eric had?
Yeah, I mean, just to answer really quickly on Beatty, boring answer. I believe the same thing as Eric. Probably change of scenery. I don't think he's anything like Vientos in profile. I don't think you do either. But just in terms of yeah. I mean, like he's probably gone in New York. Honeycutt. It's amazing, 13 games, his career is over. His career is not over after 13 games in the minor leagues, but your league mates are actually going to look at that and they're going to say 177 batting average, 250 OBP, no home runs. I'm out. Like you're going to get him anywhere you want, at least in terms of value. And so, upside is a very useful, fun guy. Downside is where Mac Horvath is right now. Maybe they strike me as kind of similar players, and maybe that's an easy comp with the organization. But he's only 21, which is still 21. He's not going to be 22 for a little while. He's a young person. He'll be fine. Well, I don't know if he'll be fine, but he'll get his chances, is what I should say. Yeah. Roden, hey man, I think you cut yourself short there, Eric. I think we talked about Horowitz and Schneider. What about Clement? What about Otto Lopez? Even there's all these guys who are the same guy. The Blue Jays love that guy. Whoever that guy is, sure. He's that guy, and that's useful. I literally started in that same 20 team that Langford helped me win. I had Clement and Otto Lopez starting in the final week. So
Clement there was two guys at the end of the year when I was looking at stats from my projections and going through position by position. There's two guys at the major level where I was like, damn, they did that. It was Ernie Clement and then Jonah Bride from the Marlins. So I was like, oh wow, like sneaky good little few months there for those guys, or full season for Clement.
Yeah, I put in a call. I said, hey guys, friggin' very low stakes league, but 20 teams, so you could make a name for yourself. I'll put you on my podcast. And so now they really turned it up. Roden's just like that guy, from Wisconsin, Middleton, Wisconsin, 25 years old. Like we wouldn't be surprised. 5'11", if he was 6 feet tall, totally different story. But no, this is a guy, and actually it looks like from what I'm seeing in his minor leagues, maybe no, he's the same guy. I mean, he's Spencer Steer kind of ish. Yeah, this is a guy where certainly he's not being valued where he should be, and I think that you're right that this is a good buying opportunity. Fast forwarding to Jarlin Susana, I guess I'll turn it around real quick to Eric. Reliever risk through the roof, right?
Oh yeah, there's definitely reliever risk. Not as much. I wouldn't say it's like high. I'll say like medium reliever risk. That was definitely there. It's definitely more than a slight chance, but I'm not as concerned about him being a reliever as I was about, like go back to Chase McDermott. I have a much higher probability that McDermott winds up in the bullpen than Susana. But I mean, yeah, Susana, that fastball slider combination is so damn good. I mean, if he can keep making those small gains, and even if he can just be, like a 10% walk rate guy, which we think is double digits, but like Freddie Peralta's lived in that 10% range. If you miss as many bats as Peralta has, and as Susana has the capability of missing, you can live in that range, even though it might be below average. So he's kind of like the pitching version of like what we're saying with like Honeycutt and other guys. Like if he can just sniff like close to average, or it's not bad command and control, I think he'll still be in the rotation, even if he maybe has a little bit of a higher whip every year than you'd like to see. But yeah, that's definitely some reliever list there with Susana. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually, it's actually a weird profile because it used to be his walks were out of control. I'm looking at it here. He actually really lowered his. I'm an
Yeah.
old school guy. I'll even say BB per 9. Whoa, what a weird thing to say. BB per 9, 3.4. It's just a cleaner number. 3.4 over 9. Like that's a good number. Like that is like what we would love to see, some material gain from Honeycutt. He's actually still just getting hit around a little bit. But you know what? I think you're right. I think that the Nationals don't have some kind of crazy rotation, whereas like they're not going to give him a chance in the rotation. I think he'll get that shot. And we have to remember, like I took some heat last year. I was like, Mason Miller needs to go to the bullpen and he'll be an electric reliever, super useful. And guys would come out at me like, no, he's gonna be so good as a starter. I'm like, same thing with Espino. I was like, no, please, like for their sake, let them just be relievers. And now what's the deal? Like, I mean, is Mason Miller the best dynasty closer? Like maybe. So like Susana, worst case scenario in a deeper league, like you get an electric closer. It's not we say reliever risk. It's like maybe in a 12-teamer, that's more of a risk.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel the same way you do
Matt.
about Susana, and I'm glad you had him on the list today, Eric, because what an incredible trade. I mean, we're going to look back on this over the next 20, 30 years when you talk about the Juan Soto trade and the return they got. There's starters all over the board, right? James Wood, potential superstar. CJ Abrams, at least an average to a slightly above average shortstop right now. We need to see his defense improve a little bit. Also, some, underlying numbers need to get better. You talk about the one player that may not work out in this deal who still has a chance in Robert Hassel. This was the return you get and want from an absolute megastar. And I think it's just a credit to the organization for Washington, because this is how you rebuild, right? It's going to help with them having the number 1 pick and having been able to get Dylan Cruz. Like those are big assets, but the foundation of this team in 3-4 years, when we see them in the playoffs, even if Susana is their lockdown closer, is going to be on the back of what Juan Soto was. And I think, Doc, to what you were saying, like I personally, when I'm looking at lockdown closer reliever risk, I could care less. If you're a 3-4 starter, which I could see Susana maybe being a number 2 if he can really get his control under lock, the difference between a number 2 and a Mason Miller for me is like, well, it's kind of the same. I'll take either. Yeah. So in all leagues, I want Susana if I can. And I think we are in that window still where you can acquire him. I feel like 2025 is closing on that window.
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up. I was going to bring up something along those lines of, I think people hear like, oh, reliever risk, and kind of get put off to that player. But like Susana could be an absolute dominant late inning guy, 8th, 9th inning guy, and be one of the better relievers in the game. He's obviously got that triple digit fastball and that slider, especially. Like those two are a really good combination. So, yeah, I mean, if it's a guy that you think is not going to pitch in the 8th or 9th, maybe more of a mid reliever, okay, yeah, then you can get put off by potential going to the bullpen. But these guys like Mason Miller is kind of a similar. He was a starter for a long time and always had that exciting stuff. Couldn't stay healthy. We hit that was the bigger thing for him. They moved into the bullpen. Now look at him. It's like, yeah, it's like him or like Class A right now. Those are the two guys. And obviously Miller's the more fun one because he strikes out more batters. But yeah, it's definitely a couple of paths to potential, success and impact for Susana. So even if he does go to the bullpen, all right, maybe he's, a top 10 reliever, 3 years from now or something like that.
Yeah, and I think the floor, and I'm gonna let you chime in on this, Doc. Like Brusdar Graterol is to me the floor. All right, when Graterol got traded from Minnesota, I was like, well, this is a steal, and he's had injuries, and the Dodgers, being the Dodgers, haven't needed him to step into a bigger role, right? But I still think Brusdar Graterol, even with the injuries, is still a pretty darn good metric reliever. At least he has the stuff. He still has the concerns with the control that he did in Minnesota before the trade. But I think that's what the floor for Susana would be is, just what you said, kind of a middle inning guy, a 6th, 7th inning guy that's going to come in. But maybe by 28, 29, maybe we see Brusdar Graterol get a run as a 3 or 4 year setup man and finally provide that value. Like it's so hard where we close a door on a guy because they've been moved to the bullpen in their earlier mid-20s, and then we just see them down the road kind of finally fulfill that potential they had. It's all about the stuff, and Susana's definitely got it.
Yeah, and so, man, first of all, this is our longest podcast of all time, which is amazing.
It's going to be 2. I'm going to split it up because no one in their right mind is going to listen to 2 hours of us just ramble. Man,
we just wish that we knew that Chris Clegg was such a friggin' baller, gamer, gritty grinder, because we did like an hour and a half or whatever, 4 hour 40, and then we talked for like an hour or 2 afterward. He's just like, hey, you guys want to go? Or he never even brought it up. We're like, do you need to go? He's like, I want to talk more baseball. This is the middle of the day. Of course, we are
a little different than what we're doing with you, Eric.
we are in Eric Cross's time though, where he stays up till 3 a.m. So this is like actually him at his prime. But this is a 9 o'clock Eastern, folks. Oh gosh. But yeah, no, this is good talking, and I mean just briefly touching on Baldwin, folks. If you haven't looked at Drake Baldwin, I actually got onto him. Listening to the ToolShed podcast. I do like to listen to their podcast. I mean, obviously ours is the greatest of all time. Nothing will ever beat it. But if you wanted like second place, that's the place to go. No, they're great. And Drake Baldwin, they started talking about him there. Frankly, I'm going to be completely honest. I think part of my brain said like Isaiah Drake Baldwin, same guy. And I knew that Isaiah Drake wasn't working out. And there's just catchers, you kind of like, you can put catching prospects to the side. And so I think something must be going on in the world where everyone has something like this going on, because he's really not being appreciated the way he should be. I mean, you can look at AA, he struggled a little bit at AA, but then you look at last year, in 2023, and he crushed it. 270 was okay, but most of that struggles was actually at high A. Then he was at plus 300 average at the high A at the AA and AAA levels, and great OBP all throughout, 385 total. So it's like the AA this year was actually the outlier, and so he's looking really solid in a great organization. And then Nick Yorke is a weird guy. Remember, he's a top prospect, especially former Boston top prospect, got a lot of love. I got to see him a little bit this year at Indy. He crushed it, man. He's been killing the minor leagues.
He dominated after that trade. I think he hit like 360 or whatever.
And it's like a weird thing that's happening where, we can talk about the Royals getting discounts. It almost seems like there's some kind of like people are noticing that the Pittsburgh Pirates are starting to crush pitching. And so I think that we're detecting there's a potential, at least, for a window of competitive Pirates play, some competitive Pirates baseball. And so it seems like Spencer Horwitz is almost getting a bump now going to Pittsburgh. There's guys who are getting a bump now going to Pittsburgh because we know that there's going to be pressure on them. I mean, Skeens might even walk into the friggin' front office one day. He's a huge guy. He just says, hey, give me a team. There's going to be, he's just got that kind of aura about him. So we'll see what happens here. Nick Yorke, if he can get up to the major leagues, he's a former first round pick. He's doing all he can. He's only 22. He's only 22 years old, folks. Yep. So lots of upside here with all of Eric's guys. This has been great.
Well, and I think too, the conversation you guys just had regarding the Yorks, the Roden, the few Blue Jays that you had brought to the table, and Doc, how you had actually won a league starting some of these guys, and Eric, you diving into some of the late season numbers. There's so much value in these guys that are outside the top 100. When you think, especially in a deeper league, well, maybe I want to roster the flashy DSL guy. There is more value in rostering the 24-year-old, the 25-year-old, really giving yourself a chance to have a little bit more depth. I think kind of piggybacking on what you were saying about Pittsburgh, they are going to have the pitching, but they don't necessarily have the hitting. So there's a lot of opportunity for a guy like Nick Yorke to come in and have his chance to really be a starter. Whereas in Boston, Eric, this firsthand, that opportunity is much slimmer, right? The Boston Red Sox are not going to put up with a Chase Meadroth or a Nick Yorke taking time to develop when Christian Campbell's saying, hey, I'm the number one prospect by Baseball America in 2024. That's just not going to happen. So I think that goes right back into the Beatty conversation. Nick Yorke got his exit ticket. This is his now opportunity to prove I'm of value and I can play at the major league level. where we just dream of those opportunities for some players. And I think at 22, it's a great opportunity because he's still young enough to show a developmental track.
Yeah, and then like him and Yorke and Mydroth both kind of got into better playing times over the last year. Obviously, Yorke
Yep.
was last season traded. Mydroth obviously went over in the Garrett Crochet deal, but now like I was like Mydroth was always a guy. He's always a good topic of conversation on Twitter over the years, but he was one where like this guy's a hitter. Like this guy is gonna be one of those guys where you like look back, you're like, man, like Mydroth played 12 years in the major leagues or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because he hits, he gets on base. Like nobody can doubt those abilities. Obviously, isn't the flashiest, funnest prospect because he doesn't have huge power or speed. But now that he's with the White Sox, who obviously are absolute shambles right now, it's like, who are they going to start? Like Brooks Baldwin and Lennon Sosa and all those, or so maybe you get a
Yeah.
shot here with maybe you get Mydroth playing. He could play a few different spots. Maybe he plays a little third, a little second, a little short, but or maybe it's just like a utility guy. I mean, that's a possible outcome too. But him and Yorke are now like, all right, they have shots to play in Pittsburgh and Chicago, respectively, that they just probably weren't going to get. Because even when you look past the big guys, Boston has, Cesar Rafaela playing all over the field, including middle infield. That David Hamilton's still there. Like there's other guys too that, even past the studs, and you're still waiting on, Campbell to get up there and Marcelo Meyer. Like, where do these kind of like second, third tier guys, where do they fit in? And it's like this. So I'm glad that they kind of use those guys as like trade sweeteners to get some deals done here. Because I definitely think that those guys will have sneaky value now and a chance to actually play, which wasn't going to be there in Boston for the most part.
Yeah, and the name that comes to mind when you talk about that, we'll wrap the show here in a minute, but is Connor Joe. Not that he's this special off the charts player, but a guy that's bounced the league enough, is older than Yorke or Meadroth, but when finally given an opportunity, he showed that he could be a good utility outfielder or a guy that can give you 100 to 120 games at multiple positions. And again, in deeper leagues, right? Not in a 12-man format necessarily, maybe not even in a 15, but as you get into the 20s and definitely the 30s, those guys are going to win or lose you a league. Like I'm starting Nicky Lopez as my shortstop in a 30. I would way rather have Meadroth or Yorke as a guy that I can fill either utility or infield, right? Than Nicky Lopez. So I definitely think that conversation is more for deeper leagues, but that's the beauty. We get to choose what leagues and what formats we play in and evaluate based off that. But I guess I'll pass it off to you, Doc, before we say goodbye. Did you have anything else for Eric today?
Man, I guess I'm just, this was such a fun podcast. I'm running out of gas here, but man, glad we had you on. This was a lot of fun. What's the future look like for Eric Cross? What do you got planned, buddy?
Oh man! And first off, thanks for having me on. Like this was really fun. It's always great when the podcast is I get both informative and fun. I mean, obviously you come for the info, but you want to be entertained, right? So I think we had some laughs here, a lot of good kind of different topics, and some even some non-baseball talk in the beginning. So yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on. And 2025, man, it's I'm still grinding. I'm still as hungry as I was back in 2017 because this has become something that helps support my family and build everything I do is for my kids. Back to the kids talk here. I'm trying to give them the best life I can and best childhood and some good memories for them. And so I'm trying to buy a new house this year. So that's like a huge thing for me. So hopefully this spring, hopefully by middle of baseball season, I'll be in a new place. We'll see. But I'm still grinding along. And Roto Baller, FTN, love both those places. Both are phenomenal sites. A lot of good content on both of those. And doing my own thing and love the podcast. Chris and I continue to grow it. We have so many ideas, so much stuff lined up, and just keep getting better and keep having fun doing it. That's at the root of it all. I'm having fun just writing and talking about the game that I've loved since I was in diapers, and don't want that to change anytime soon.
Eric, what is your Patreon for those that are interested to follow along with you?
Yeah, so it's linked in my bio too. So if you go to at Eric Cross MLB, you can find it there. But it's also ToolShed and I do obviously a lot of dynasty and prospect stuff there. Some redraft stuff as well. I love all formats, so I try to do a little bit of everything there and hit as many groups of people that play different leagues as I can. So yeah, ToolShedFantasy.com and linked in my bio as well.
Hell yeah, Eric, this was amazing. Thank you for joining us today. We enjoyed it, I think, just as much as you did, and we appreciate all the time you spent in the industry. I personally appreciate the work you've done because it encouraged me to jump into more of a content creation space. That's, you have to see someone do it and believe you can do it yourself. And again, you and Chris have done such a great job with ToolShed and your work on social media that I thank you for that. And I hope you've given other people confidence to jump into it as well, because it's a really important thing in this world is to encourage each other. But again, man, thank you so much. And for everybody, we will catch you next time. All right. It was awesome to have Eric on today. We really appreciate him spending time. Remember, you can follow him and his podcast and the work he does at Patreon, on X, as well as the ToolShed podcast. But I'll turn it over to Doc to say goodbye.
Yeah, for the first time in a while, you might be able to hear this more clearly than ever before. I'm your Huckleberry.
We will catch you guys next week.